I have found that the Essentials of Buddhist Philosophy. It's on the public domain archive or the Internet Archive. And archive.org has it,
Oh,
so you can just view it right there, page through it,
right.
or you can download it. But I couldn't find the chart, and I couldn't read the picture either. So, but then I found another. I don't know. I was looking for charts that were similar. I was trying to find that one online. I found an interesting article from Tricycle that had a very different chart, but it was interesting too. I posted that onto the website.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And you said the PDF of this book contains the charts, or that you couldn't?
I couldn't find the chart in that PDF. Yeah. But there's like at the. It's as I page through it. There's a part where the pages get wider, but they're blank, so it's like they couldn't scan them or something. So.
Yeah, it was an insert.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is the new book that I got this week.
Ornament of
It's the Ornament of Abhidharma, and the back claim the single greatest Tibetan commentary on one of the most well-known and cited works of Indian Buddhism, now presented for the first time in English.
Wow.
So this is essentially, this just got published last year. In the 13th century, this Tibetan guy wrote a commentary on Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosa. And Abhidharma Kosa is like the commentary that's used by all the Tibetan, Chinese, and Japanese traditions. So this is, I don't know, 1,500 page work, but so that's kind of neat. There hasn't really been a lot of interesting stuff written on Abhidharma. We used, until fairly recently, this is the other one that, Comprehensive Manual of Abhidharma by Bhikshu Bodhi. Bhikshu Bodhi was the person who put together all the sutras, the Pali text collection. He's an American scholar that spent a lot of time over in Southeast Asia. And these are both dense, very dense encyclopedic works. The person who writes the introduction, the translator, American translator of this big Tibetan one, says, impossible to read cover to cover. But they use them as a reference, and it's got indexes, so you reference it. Like, I think we'll take a look at the part here that deals with karma. Karma is always an interesting subject. And so if you're going to look at a particular topic, these big compendiums allow you to go and see what the earliest Buddhist thought was on that particular subject. And if you're having trouble falling asleep at night, you can just read it cover to cover.
I read an interesting article from Tricycle, and I posted it. Her teacher told her to just do a study of Abhidharma, and she was a psychologist. And she said something interesting, which is that, or a few things, but one that I thought said that it was like studying it was very difficult, but whenever she was done with it, she felt like something was unlocked in her mind, or she felt like lighter, like it was very challenging to do in the moment, but afterwards it had the same effect as like deep meditation or something.
Yeah, I think that kind of very detailed examination gets your mind focused in the same way that meditation does. So in that sense, it's kind of a shamatha type practice. You have to focus on the very minute, abstract distinctions between this and that, and it raises a lot of interesting questions. And they come. This third course that we're doing on the Abhidharma. We started by talking about Gandhara, then we met Nagasena, the Gandhara and Abhidharma master, and we got a little bit of the kind of way in which these compendiums would be used. When they say that Nagasena was an Abhidharma master, he really had a wide understanding of the tradition. He studied, he'd read the compendium, so he knew all the talking points and ideas of this particular school, which was probably Sarvastivadin, since he was in Gandhara. And right now we're looking at how this chart of elements developed. And then we're going to go on and look at the Abhidharma Kosa, the Vasubandhu work, probably through the Tibetan commentary. And perhaps we'll do some of the Theravada one too. So the two big compendiums that survive, and there may be more that I'm not aware of, but the two that I am, are the Abhidharma Kosa, again used by Tibet, China, and Japan as their compendium of early Buddhist thought. And Buddhaghosa's Path of Purification, which is used in a similar way by the Theravada. And in fact, they were both written about the same time when such teaching tools and reference works were useful. Because they were starting to set up universities, and it's really helpful to have a university to have some authoritative text. So the last time we looked at a chart of, I think, 84 elements or 72 elements. There was an early formation of the element chart, and it's preserved. It was a Sarvastivadin one. It's preserved by the school in Japan called the Kosa school. But the Sarvastivadins were, although they had great influence over all the northern traditions, were on a little bit on the conservative side. There was a particular Hinayana school that was quite advanced, and almost somewhere between Hinayana and Mahayana, who pioneered many of the Mahayana ideas, although they're regarded as essentially a Hinayana school. And they're called the Sautrantikas, Sautran, Tika. Sautrantikas, and they also have one of their other names is Sarva Shunyavada. Now, Sarva Shunyavada is an interesting name because Sarva means all, Shunya means emptiness, and Vada means complete. So, complete, everything is completely empty. School. And that's pretty radical for a Hinayana school. And they survive as a subsect in Japan of the Madhyamaka school. So some of these very early Buddhist intellectual schools survive, are kept alive. Now the Sautrantikas, as I said, their belief is that there are these elements, but they're not real. They're empty. They would do a meditation, which was like the analysis of dissolution, where you looked at appearances, and then you realized that appearances, like your television set, are made up of all sorts of component parts, and those things are made up of component parts, and those things are made up of certain kinds of raw materials. And those raw materials are molecules, and those molecules are full of atoms, and those atoms, and you take it all the way back down into nothingness. And that was one of their meditations. So their whole thrust is that nothing is actually real. Everything is unreal. There's no, and everything is just coming together in the moment. For them, of all these causes and conditions. In Buddhism, there's always causes and conditions because that's karma, which we'll talk about later. In their view, the Sautrantika view, with respect to time, only the present is real. I think I mentioned before that the Sarvastivadins felt that the past, the present, and the future were all real, and actually ongoing streams of event that sort of influenced each other. The Sautrantika view is that time is just really momentary. Everything's just a coming together. It's only in the moment that anything is happening. That made me think of what my own view on the subject is with respect to time. And I thought, well, I think the past and the present are real. And I'm willing to speculate that the past has a kind of continuous existence. And I see it as like you have an ocean liner on the ocean. So the ocean liner is moving across the ocean, right? And in that ocean liner, which is very long, there's past and there's present. And where you are on the ocean liner is the present, and then there's this past. And essentially the past is like what's still on, but at some point the past drops off, the ocean liner moves on, and the future hasn't come yet because the ocean liner hasn't moved there. So in that sense, the past and present both are real and interact with each other, but in a short kind of way. And they're both floating on the emptiness of the Dharmakaya. That aside, the Sautrantikas introduced the ideas of twofold egolessness, which is a classic Mahayana idea that gets picked up. That there's ego, the self would seem to be non-existent, so there's egolessness of self. But for the Sautrantikas, there's also egolessness of dharmas. The dharmas do not have any substance. There's nothing abiding about these elements. They're just temporal. They're part of the temporal momentary mix of life. So that's twofold egolessness, and that's complete emptiness. And they also introduced the ideas of the two truths, that there's a supreme truth, which is emptiness, and a relative truth, which is the world as it appears to us. So they did a map. They're somewhat between the Sarvastivadin one we looked at last week had 72. They have 84. And then we're going to look later at the Yogacara one, which has 100. So they're in between. There's Sarvastivadins and the Yogacharans. And these schools all overlapped in time, so they were able to kind of cross-communicate and work on their systems and borrow things. So they have 84 elements, and all these elements are conceived to have no abiding essence at all, as I said. They're empty of self-nature, and there's essentially nothing there. So when you say that it's empty of nature, you're also denying, the abiding nature of the material world, or what normally is called material reality, the reality of the senses, that what we see out there is a real world. What our senses are showing us is an actual physical world. And the Sarvastivadins would say, yes, that there are material facts, there are mental facts, and there are moral facts. And the Sautrantikas are going to say, no, there are only momentary facts. There's nothing abiding. And the momentary fact is happening in the sphere of nothingness. So what do they add to the Dharma elements? Interestingly enough, and again, showing their kind of progressive nature, under form, for the Sarvastivadins, form was just the senses and the sense objects. So we have eyes, so we see there's a lot of stuff around us. We have ears, so we hear things. And so forth and so on. That was the material reality for Sarvastivadins. Here they're going to keep that and add the four elements, the four classic elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. And so now there's a sense that in addition to what we're perceiving, there's these forces, the forces of the elements, the elemental forces are moving through things as well. So it's a little more enhanced view of material reality. Of course, here their material reality is the apparent reality of the moment. The elemental realities of earth, water, fire, and wind are preserved a lot in the Tibetan family, so they're kind of a sort of a precursor of that. They had three in each, they consist of a number of existential facts. And so three of the indeterminate ones, so there's good facts like, loyalty or something like that, courage. And there are bad facts like greed. And these are facts of human experience. Everyone in the human is going to encounter these things, right? And everyone is part of the human experience. And so the indeterminate ones don't particularly have a moral quality. They're just sort of facts of life. And the three they added were dislike, pleasure, and sleep. So what do you think about that? Well, we're all going to encounter that. Those are things that are going to make up our daily life. So the basic elements of existence, if you will. Then there's three they added to elements not physical or mental, which are things that humans are going to encounter. Old age, death, and meditation. So that's the Sautrantikas, a very interesting school. And then the next Abhidharma gets picked up in Mahayana. As tradition would have it, Vasubandhu writes this great compendium of the Abhidharma of the Sarvastivadin school, but then he's converted to becoming a Mahayana. And then, as a master of the Mahayana tradition, he writes commentaries to all the Sanghas' works, and he writes his own treatises, which become very important in all Mahayana Buddhism in China, Tibet, and Japan. So the Yogacara school, as it existed in India and also in China, had its own version of an Abhidharma. Of course, it's a Mahayana Abhidharma. So they just take the compendium and they add to it new stuff that they're interested in talking about, and maybe they change, take out some stuff, change some stuff. So these compendiums are kind of like different encyclopedias, catechisms. They're complete discussions of the whole Dharma, the whole Buddhist system, with all its advice and metaphysics and descriptions of reality and so forth. Sangha, one of the Sangha's works is a work on Abhidharma, which I have not located yet. So it continues on. Now, when you get to schools further down the road, it drops off. The Yogacaras are the last ones to really study things in this level of detail. You get to something like Zen or Pure Land or even Tantra. Really, there's not time for this kind of reading of encyclopedias. You have to have a very subtle situation for the encyclopedia to flourish. Even a religious encyclopedia or a Buddhist encyclopedia, something that contains, all the different teachings. You have a very subtle culture. In times that are not less subtle, or people are too busy to devote the immense amount of time it takes to learn all this. So the Yogacara school has its Abhidharma, and they're going to sort of pick up again from the Sautrantikas. They're going to say that there is reality. It's not all empty. There is reality, but the reality is in the moment. So they're going to kind of meet them halfway. They're going to say, yes, everything's in the moment. But when things happen in the moment, they are real. So our moment-to-moment life is a real life. It's just completely temporal. It's always moving, it's always changing. You never step into the same moment twice, that kind of thing. And what we think about what's happening each moment, that's our particular, mental spinning or discursive thought, or our personal narratives, or our narratives about what the world is. All descriptive, discursive talk, that's all fictional. That's all doesn't have any particular reality. It's just we're just doing that as a spinning of the mind, if you will. It's sort of like our life. What's real is if you're watching a football game and you have the sound off and you're just watching the guys move around the field. So that's real life, because that's real things are going on. People are moving. Things are happening. Nothing's ever happening. Nothing. It's always changing. It goes on and on. I mean, it's always changing, and yet it has a certain kind of continuity too. Now, when you turn the sound on, then you get all you get these commentators, yakking it up, and back and forth. Well, that's the part that the Yogacarans call fictional. So, the yakking of the commentators, which is the yakking of your own mind, is it's neither here nor there, but it's nothing you should take seriously. What's happening, you should take somewhat seriously, except the fact that it's all disappearing moment by moment. What you really should rest your attention on, not get caught by this game that's going on. Certainly don't get caught by the commentators, which is the lowest part of it. But just enjoy the afternoon, or enjoy the space, ultimate reality, in that the space that surrounds and penetrates and is sort of the radiance of the whole thing of being alive. That's without any differentiation or at all. That unity, that totality is the Dharmakaya, and that's ultimately the only thing that's real and abiding. Because it's unborn, it's also undying. And all of this experience, from the Yogacara point of view, takes place within consciousness. So when we get to their chart, which I sent out copies, Tony and Bailey, you need to send me your email addresses so that I can get you forwarded stuff. Joe has my email address. It's westerntext@msn.com. And Arvella and Tony, if you could send me an email, then I would have you in my system and I could send you materials, if you would so like. So let's see here. Anyway, here's our chart for the month. There it is. And it doesn't look very good when you print it out, but from the image that I sent, but if you have a nice computer screen, it looks good on the computer screen. So what you'll notice about this chart, their scheme here, the 100 Dharmas of the Hasso school, which is the Japanese Yogacara school that they got this from, is that the other two, the Hinayana ones, both started with form. And they went form, and then they went to mind, and then they went to mental functions, and things not associated with minds and non-created elements. So that was their flow. And that's because, again, the form is sort of the foundation in that system. But here, because we're in Yogacara land, mind is the source. So mind is the beginning of everything, and specifically consciousness. So the 8 kinds of consciousness are the first 8 elements in their listing of what's real, what's existentially real for us. And so what's real is that we have eye consciousness, we have ear consciousness, we have scent consciousness, we have taste consciousness, we have body consciousness, we have a conscious mind that integrates all our sense perceptions. We have a subconscious or discursive mind, a conceptual mind, that's the commentary that I talked about. And we have a storehouse of seeds of our experience. These seeds of our experience are predispositions to act a certain way under certain situations. And somewhat that's good. I mean, you learn not to touch things that are hot and so forth. The learning by experience. But we also have a lot of predispositions towards activities that cause bad karma, negative activities, predispositions to confusion, predispositions to greed and desire, predispositions to anger and hatred, things that, if they come up, we get very angry about it. And it's just like, what happened? And so those kinds of things are all sort of stored in the storehouse consciousness, which is sort of like an unconscious in the system. So that's mind, which is also consciousness. And that then, unlike form, which we then sort of perceive, here mind generates the whole world. But as it generates the world that we perceive as being an external world to us. So as we flow across this chart, we go from mind to the mental functions. So we still haven't really, we're still within our, within mind. And so the mental functions are touch, sensation, thought, idea, volition, desire, resolve, remembrance, concentration, wisdom. And then they have sort of moral qualities, because a lot of they're very concerned with the good mental qualities and not so negative mental qualities. So the good mental qualities here, and you'll see where we've added a few. Good mental qualities: belief, shame, shyness, absence of covetousness, absence of hatred, absence of ignorance, energy, repose of mind, I think that's new. Vigilance, that's new. Equanimity, that's new. And non-injury. So those are all good qualities of mind that are to be encouraged. Then there are the ones that we want to purify, which are covetousness or greed, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, doubt, and false view, which I may say is a huge problem right now in this country. But that aside, there are also many minor evils. Those are the big 6 evils: greed, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, doubt, and false views. And the minor ones: anger, enmity, concealment, affliction, envy, miserliness, parsimony, deception, fraudulence, injury, pride, shamelessness, non-bashfulness, restlessness, low-spiritedness, depression, unbelief, sloth, negligence. You can see they added some here that would be evils in the Mahayana, especially low-spiritedness, sloth, negligence, forgetfulness, distraction. Those are really not at all, but it's not the right qualities. Those are going to count as minor evils. And non-discernment. And then similar to those other systems, repentance, drowsiness, reflection, investigation are indeterminate ones. And then, midway through this outlawing of reality, finally having talked about consciousness, about functions, about moral qualities, now we get to the real world, what normally would be the real world, but here is just forms that appear to us as through our organs, and then also ones that appear to us in meditative visions. And then also they add, and some of those are sort of various kinds of visionary and states that arise, which is a Mahayana thing. So once we have sense perception, then there are again all these human factors that are just general human factors. All humans acquire things, have life, are part of species where there's similarity, differentiate between one species and another, have meditation experiences of various kinds, gain insight through those experiences, use language, name, word, letter, deal with birth, age, impermanence, death, also enjoy stability, becoming, being able to distinguish things, union, and then other kinds of time, number, totality. All sorts of kinds of things that affect us as human beings. And then finally we get to the non-created elements. So these are actually ones that lie outside of the mind. Mind has created this whole world of consciousness, mental function, moral qualities, perceived forms, perceived forces. But outside of all of that creation of mind lies space and liberation. And here there are four kinds of liberation that get mentioned. There is the liberation obtained by knowledge, liberation not by nature, not by knowledge. Those are the two that they picked up from before. And then they added two new ones. A liberation by emotionless state of heavenly meditation, which sounds pretty nice. And liberation by the stoppage of idea and sensation. So that gets us up to 99 elements. And the 100th element, which lies outside of everything, is suchness, true suchness itself. So, you see how much fun we had with this. Any questions or comments?
Those last couple, liberation by heavenly what, and liberation by emptiness or something. What were those two? Those sound a lot. Are those? It's like the seed of Vajrayana or Mahayoga.
Well, I think we're still in the Mahayana. You have to remember the deity yoga is a Mahayana innovation. Tantra just adds a wrathful deities and has kind of different pantheon. So a Sangha, for example, goes up to the Tushita heaven and is given the Mahayana teachings that he writes about in his 5 books by Maitreya. And that sounds somewhat similar but different to this: liberation by a motionless state of heavenly meditation. So, this idea that you could go to the heavens, experience the heavens of different deities, was present at this time. And so you could obtain teachings from them, or you could just meditate, go to Tashita Heaven and meditate. And the next one was a liberation by the stoppage of idea and sensation. So that's just another one of these stopping the mind. So the mind just stops.
So deity yoga is like pairing those two together.
I suspect that the Yogacara is, although they all these things are outside of creation, I think they probably have perhaps a hierarchy of liberation, in the sense that this liberation in the heavenly realm is pretty, it seems to be higher than just stopping your mind. I mean, and then also the one where you have liberation by nature sounds almost like Dzogchen, like the original nature itself, the primordial wakens you up to itself. So that sounds pretty good. The one liberated by insight or knowledge, again, sounds a little weaker than the two in the middle. So maybe there must have been some teachings connected with all these points. And perhaps as we dive deeper, we will find out more.
There's something else that caught my ear that you said when you earlier on when you were talking about the good, bad, and indeterminate factors or facts. I get it, but I just wonder if you would say more about dislike as an indeterminate fact. And on first glance, it looks like it should just definitely be a negative factor, but indeterminate.
Well, it's indeterminate because they could go either way. You could dislike casinos and dens of ill repute. You could dislike.
I see.
Hearing the Dharma disparaged. You could dislike dishonesty in public office.
Okay.
So you could dislike the people who abuse their responsibilities and so forth. So yeah, there's you could dislike could be applied to properly or improperly. So that's why it's indeterminate. It doesn't have a consistent moral quality. It varies by what you're doing with it.
I would think
Same
that
with
doubt
pleasure.
How about doubt and certainty? Because, being so certain that your point of view, that you figured it all out, and that you know what's right, that seems like a problem right now.
Well, arrogance is an evil, and doubt is an evil. And so it seems that they're trying to take the middle road there, perhaps, in that certainty or arrogance, overly certain, or that is problematic, and not having the confidence of your original nature is a problem as well. Not believing in yourself, not believing in the Dharma, not believing in the jewels and such. mean, usually when they talk about doubt, they mean doubt toward the, the truth of everything. So that could be a big problem. So I think they're trying to be in the middle here. They don't, you just should, believe. You should understand. And then here, when they don't mean belief in the way we use it sometimes in Christianity, like dogma, but just simply that you know the Dharma. That's a good moral quality. And then, you believe in goodness or something like that.
So these qualities have nuances. I mean, these divisions have lots of nuances, which is, of course, why people can write books about it.
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit written about each one of these. I mean, I'm just listing them and saying but that's because I haven't read, the 2,000 or 3,000 pages of commentary.
Right, and that would be everyone parsing out all these different nuances.
I suspect so. And then a lot of these things start getting into, how. I mean, the topic is a matter of great importance. I mean, what is real? So they're all discussing what is real, and then as they get into it, they're sort of saying, well, this is real. This is this is an abiding human, experience, a fact. And you see, as you look around and you put it in a sort of an existential thing on what it is that we're experiencing, what all humans experience, then it becomes kind of fascinating to me. It's a kind of, you can sort of get an existentialist psychology out of it, which I find kind of very neat. Like, what is it we experience? I mean, because to ask what is real is really to ask what do we experience, because that's going to be the most real. Now, one of the things we experience, when we experience things directly, like what it was like eating dinner tonight, but then some things we get sort of indirectly, that's essentially hearsay, like social media or news media. But in as much as we're living in a world where we eat dinners, we're also living in a world where we eat dinners and people are gossiping to us all the time and telling us stuff all the time. And that's also in there as well. So it's very, it's getting the right perspective on the whole thing, it seems to be. The key here.
In that tricycle article that I mentioned earlier, she says something like, she compares it to Western psychology or really contrasts it with it, in that in Western psychology everything is about, dividing and categorizing in this way, and like Freud's ego, id, superego, and all that. And then she said, even though there's all these categories in Abhidharma, everything's contextual, so that you experience doubt, and that's the experience. That's what's real, and then the what all the causes and everything surrounding it are the context that matter. Not that, I don't know. I'm not doing this, making the point clearly. But that rather than being a very analytical, dividing type of exercise, it's a contextual, experiential way of looking at the mind. Like when does doubt come up, or when does any of the other, when does meditation come up? Or when does that experience arise? What are the causes for that?
Well, it all comes out of experience, and it also comes out of particularly in this situation, meditative experience. So these moral qualities are felt, they're observed. They're kind of they've been around for a long time. They're temporal in such as when they arise moment by moment for us, but as qualities of mind, arrogance. Humans have had issues with arrogance for a long time. People have had issues with all these things. All these things have been human experience and that's the neat thing about this chart, because they are looking at something that's more real than just each moment arising and dissolving and changing, this continual flux of the moment. These things have been part of human experience. They make sense to us now. They were written 2,000 years ago. They would have applied 1,000 years before that, or sometime. As soon as humans became conscious at a certain level and had a certain kind of level of civilization, all these forces and moral qualities and experiences are going to arise. So it's fascinating, also for the depth and the completeness of it.
It's also not mythological or narrative or mythical or anything like that, which would be
right. That's a really good point. It's on a totally different order than the mythological explanations. I mean, think about it. We're in the 3rd century, where this is getting its final, 3rd or 4th century, where it's getting put in its final form. I mean, this is a long time ago. This is definitely deep in the mythological ages of history. And this is entirely rational based on meditation and insight and analysis. So that's pretty, it's definitely a step forward for the human to look at things in this kind of way. And very early on, nowadays it's quite common. We all look at things. Universities don't teach, mythology. They teach facts like these.
I'm tempted to observe that this is sort of like scientific observation of one's experience or mankind's experience, and it thrills me that it's written 2,000 years ago. I get really upset with people who talk about the evolution of mankind when they don't give, they don't imagine that mankind had these qualities of being able to observe not only the external world but the internal world in great depth, and that's how the heck we did evolve and did survive. And we had those capabilities. That's my belief.
No, it is. That's great. When you really reflect on that, you get a great appreciation that as dry as this is sometimes, it was an incredible breakthrough for the human beings to have a mode of understanding that was open to all and, essentially rational.
Well, and then meditation is like the scientific observation of a telescope or microscope, because all these little elements of experience are flashing in and out, or sticking around or whatever, but they're looking at them not in a subjective way. They're looking at them, so they're making objects of these psychological things that would otherwise just be just take a person over, and that would not be visible, or you couldn't take an objective stance toward them. So that's very scientific too.
It is generally true that it's been a conceit of the modern age. And I think the modern age, and it's the 20th century, has been particularly bad. I think it's a little better now. But certain ages are just very arrogant. And the modern age was terribly arrogant about the intelligence of predecessors. And they just thought they knew so much more than everybody else. And somewhat the Victorians were like that, but the moderns are really bad that way. And so primitive people are totally ignorant. People who lived thousands of years ago, they don't, science is, what's new is what's best, and all this old stuff isn't. And, that's such a bunch of nonsense. And they find out now that, even people that 40,000 years ago are quite intelligent. You're in a world where there's all different kinds of plants and food sources. How did you think these people figured out what to eat and what not to eat? That you had to be very, and their abilities to observe and to make insights obtained through observation were critical. You put a scientist out in the jungle, he's going to die in a few days. I mean, they had no ability. They've lost their intelligence. They don't know anything about how to live in that kind of way. There's a lot that's been lost. Civilization is not necessarily healthy and wholesome force. I'm reading a series of essays by the poet Gary Snyder, who was a Zen Buddhist, called The Wild or something like that. He's talking about how we bred wildness out of everything, how we're trying to breed wildness out of animals to make them sort of docile meat producers, and how cattle used to live in the woods and be very smart and know how to, forage and take care of themselves. And now they're just dumb beasts. And same with sheep and pigs. And by extension, human beings, that once they could live out in the, wild in the woods, and, they've actually had some skills. And every generation has less skills than the generation before it. And so, the civilization is not really working out. So good. And this idea that we're so much more intelligent now than these past people were, when we're actually getting dumber and lazier all the time, it doesn't really pan out.
I would add a little. I think what's interesting is that well, as a collective, we're creating a lot of knowledge, but individually we seem to be getting a little dumber and late, or else, I don't know, we're focusing our skill sets on something that's completely different. I mean, the kids who grew up with computers are way more adept at functioning in the virtual world than I am or have any interest to be. So it's kind of unfair to say that they're dumber. Their intellect and their focus is on something that I don't think is worth focusing on. So I think that it's been more that kind of a process where the next generation is, because the complexity of the collective experience continues to get so complex. I mean, how many people does it take to build a computer? How many thousands of people does it take to build a computer? And all that collective coordination is what civilization is. I don't know if dumber is really quite catches the essence of it.
Well, we started with George Washington as president, and now look where we got. So I rest my case.
Yes, well, we stopped by on Andrew Jackson on the way here, so I don't know. Our first hugely racist president, I think.
Yeah, the one that Trump keeps as a picture in his Oval Office.
Oh, is that Andrew Jackson?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
his
first thing was to make sure they weren't taking Jackson is his favorite of presidents, and his first thing was to make sure Jackson wasn't going to lose his spot on the $20 bill to Harry Tubman. So yeah, he's
Jackson
he sort
was
of
a real
off as the modern day equivalent of the Kentucky ruffian or Tennessee ruffians, tromping all over the pristine White House. He's doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, he is actually.
Well, the thing about whether we're becoming dumber or not, we are becoming dependent on more. We're becoming competent in virtual and social places, and dependent on society, and less competent in understanding, the world in its natural sense, and that can't be good. I mean, we're getting.
I think it's the movement away from the natural world that's I find problematic. I think in some sense, a certain kind, people always have to pay attention to the social conditions of their time and the way you navigate social structures of your time. And that's kind of a particular knowledge that's for each generation has that but my generation was more in touch with nature than my children and the grandchildren who are worse yet. And my parents, oddly enough, actually were less in touch with nature than my family, my brother and I are. But our grandparents certainly were way more, and then going further back, then they're all on farms. But that was the modern era. That was the one that really decided they wanted to, the 20th century era. They wanted to jettison nature.
Talk about dualism.
Well, it became painfully apparent by the 1960s and 70s that was a totally bunco approach. And we were tearing up the environment, and it wasn't sustainable, and the rivers and everything was polluted. It was just a mess, as we all know. So Yeah, our parents just were, nobody was paying attention on that point. Uh,
Amy Irvin talks about in the Desert Cabal about getting away from or going away from being in nature and trying to find out who we truly are, and in that way helping society. And it kind of speaks against what we're talking about, though, in that we need to be in nature to find ourselves, or to almost as a meditative approach. And she argues that maybe we need to get away from that because we're so, as Westerners, spoiled, and that many other cultures don't spend the time we do in nature and are more socially adept at helping one another.
Hmm.
huh. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I think the third world is more. They're still more in nature than we are, even though they have a kind of. There's a kind of not nature in terms of forests and countryside, but certain kind of elemental human nature. I mean, they're here in a slum in Indonesia or something, or New Delhi or wherever. So it's pretty gritty stuff. So yeah, I think actually it's because they're deep into nature that they cooperate more. And because nature is such an overwhelming force. I mean, if you, for example, in Bangladesh, where they live in this floodplain of the Ganges that floods like every year, and they're always losing relatives in their farms, and I mean those people under that kind of force in nature, they do have there's no room for a lot of frivolity of ego. I mean, they do have to work together to survive and help each other, and I think and sometimes it brings out some incredible selflessness that you don't get, say, in upper middle class suburban America, even though it might be surrounded by green belts. Now the idea is kind of the idea of the wild, and the wild is force within nature, but it's also a force within human nature too. I mean, there's parts of human nature that are very gritty and primeval, and so that in some ways we distance ourselves from that as well. We distance ourselves in modern America from intimacy and closeness of the type that traditional society was full of. People were in each other's faces considerably, and they still are in places which aren't rich. But our individualism just isolates everybody more and more from each other. And that seems to be, again, the kind of product of civilization to create, this nation, a world where everybody gets it their way, but of course, and everyone's by themselves too.
Yeah, that's kind of a trade-off.
So, individuality must be balanced by the communality of the tantric feast.
Huh? Yes.
I will leave that with you as my parting thought.
I like that one. I like that a lot.
Good.
Discussion. Thank you all. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
All right. Thank
Dedicate
you.
merit. By this
This
merit,
man,
we all attain omniscience to keep the everyday world doing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.